And we're live.
We're live.
Hi.
Yay. Hi.
Hi. Hi, everyone. This is Coaching Conversation. We're talking about building a culture of belonging. I am Todd Karges, and I'm here with I'm so delighted to be here with my friend and colleague, Gail Barker. Gail, you're going to do a better job than I will. Why don't you introduce yourself? I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, I am so glad I'm here. I'm glad to be here with you in this space, and thanks for inviting me into the conversation. My name is Gail Barker. I am a 22-year veteran in the coaching sphere. I have my own company, Stellar Coaching and Consulting, and it's in that capacity that I'm here today. I also do hold the role of Associate Director of Faculty for the Coactive Training Institute, and that is something that also takes a big chunk of my time. I do both. That is my full-time job. Used to be just something on the side, and now those are reversed. And I full-time with CTI, and then still have my own coaching practices where I work with leaders and their teams.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And I love it. It's all good.
Yeah, well, and you know what, and speaking and I'm a CTI fanboy, right? So speaking as from that perspective, I am so glad that you're doing the work for that organization that you do. So
thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that feel that way.
Yeah.
All right, so should we jump in?
Let's do it.
Let's jump in. We're here to talk about building a culture of belonging, and I love to start these conversations just sort of by picking apart some words. Yeah. Just so that we're all on the same page. And the two that are here that I think are important are belonging and culture. And is it okay if we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So not to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna. Like belonging, when you think belonging, what's there?
So my relationship to the concept of belonging has evolved over time. Mm-hmm. As I've matured and grown and learned, I've come to realize that we can get really simplistic about what it means to belong, or we could dive into the nuance of it. Mm-hmm. And I think historically, and maybe even at this moment in time, for many people, when we think of belonging, we think of fitting in. Where do I fit in? Mm-hmm. But belonging is about so much more than that. And where I first sort of had it really land for me was I had seen a graphic, an image, and it's a clove of garlic that is sort of like the entirety of the head of garlic is there with one clove missing, and there's a segment of like a mandarin orange that's fit in there. And technically it fits. It fits in. It does not belong.
But it does not belong.
Right?
I love that.
And so, I know. So for me, belonging is that, like, where do I actually belong? Where am I included? Where am I welcomed? Where do I make sense in all of me? That's what belonging is for me. What about for you? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, and that's so resonant because there's I love the distinction between fitting in and belonging, right? Because fitting in feels like effort. It feels like work.
Yeah, I can make myself fit in a lot of places.
And I have made myself fit, and I imagine you have too, in lots of places.
Absolutely.
Because that's just, it happens, right? Yeah. And really, I mean, show me someone who has a story of being othered, and I'll show you someone who's had to do that at some point or another. Belonging is that feeling instead, where it's like, I'm in this place, and I trust the people that I'm in this place with. Like, if I'm a clove of garlic and you're a clove of garlic and we're in a bulb of garlic, right? Then it just like, it makes sense, but there's no way for the mandarin orange segment to thrive there.
Right. Exactly. It's like, that's beautifully put. It's like, where is this space where I get to show up as all of me and grow and nurture, and in turn be grown and nurtured, right? Like it's like all of that, and grow others. Yeah, exactly.
And the thing that I want to name too here is, it's not about us being the same.
Not at all.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, because I sent you that video, right? Or that video clip from the group called Unity, who does that dance on Britain's Got Talent.
Yes.
To the song Village. And their closing statement, right? It's not our differences that divide us. Like, we need to stop pretending that our differences aren't allowed. Exactly. It's like differences get to be here, and they get to be accepted and celebrated and acknowledged and embraced. And that's where you belong.
Yes. I love that. Okay, so we're aligned on belonging. How about culture?
Culture is interesting because it's so intangible, right? It's
Hmm.
not a quantitative thing, it's a qualitative thing. Just like belonging is, but culture is
Hmm.
the water in which we swim.
Yes.
And again, I think a culture of belonging is that space where I swim in this water and I feel um, nurtured and nourished by
Hmm.
it, right? I
Yeah.
can swim in lots of waters, and some
Hmm.
waters do not feel like the culture I wanna be in. Some
Right.
feel downright poisonous, quite frankly. Yeah,
That is true.
exactly.
There's an expression that I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, that at least with respect to organizational or workplace culture, right? Culture, you can, how does it go? Culture is how you feel
Yeah,
on Sunday night before you have to be there again on Monday morning.
right,
And
and yeah,
yeah,
and I think it's Peter Drucker, and boy, I hope I'm not wrong on that. I don't wanna misquote,
it's one of
but
the cool things about being live. It
right?
doesn't
It's like
matter. We'll
people
figure
can
it
go look it up.
out.
But the quote is like, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And so the
Yes.
reason I name it is because it's easy, I think, in some spaces to believe that if we just focus on the strategy, we'll be
Hmm.
fine.
Hmm.
When we don't pay attention to culture,
Hmm.
um, we lose the opportunity to create a meaningful strategy.
Yes.
Whatever. So if we're talking like business culture, workplace culture, but
Right.
even socially, right? It's like, what are we here to do?
Yep.
What is the culture we're creating that will allow us to execute strategy meaningfully?
Hmm.
That's culture. Culture is the stuff that allows us to swim.
Oh, isn't that so? There's something coming up for me that I think is interesting because I've been thinking of this in terms of workplace culture. And you brought up a context that's different, which I love.
Uh-huh,
Because you like I've been beating the drum of workplace culture for a long time and saying, culture is fantastic and it's top down.
uh-huh,
And the reason that I believe this is because I've been in places where senior leaders have attempted to outsource culture and it's never successful, right? It
never
always has to be,
successful.
you need to
No.
believe from the top. but
Yes.
but I guess what's interesting about what you just said
Mm,
is, if we're talking about creating a culture of belonging,
mhm,
are we really talking, I mean, and maybe organizationally, yes, it's still top down, like within the context of a business or a church or a community center or any
right.
other organization, really. um, but if we're talking about something that's sort of more society writ large, I wonder if that top, like it, I hadn't considered the top downness of it,
Yeah,
because like the ability to create culture, the
yeah,
culture that I want to be in, a culture
yeah,
of belonging,
yeah, yeah.
from like suddenly there's agency that I didn't think that I had from the middle of the organization.
Right. So, love that you're raising this because I think both are true. I think there is a way I don't have to be right about this, Todd, but this is just
Sure.
sort of I'm riffing off what you said. I think there absolutely is a way that what happens at the top of a hierarchy, and I don't care how you say it, most organizations have got a hierarchy of some sort in place, right? It
Totally, they
might be
do. Yep.
relatively flat, but it's still a hierarchy.
Yep.
So, what's happening at the top is absolutely going to inform culture.
Hmm.
Um, and no matter where you are in the system, you also have agency to inform. You may
Yes.
not have as much influence as someone at the top. It's one
Hmm.
of the unfortunate things about hierarchy, right? Like what's up there might weigh a little bit differently into the culture. It's why I think in lots of spaces, I'm thinking of a particular school dynamic that I once witnessed. Like the teachers all had this amazing cohesive culture of belonging, um, and then they had an administrator who came in who tried to do things differently.
Hmm.
And fortunately, this culture was strong enough that it was able to withstand that, and eventually the administrator got woven into it, which is great because then you have a holistic, cohesive
Hmm.
culture. But sometimes the person at the top or the folks at the top, by virtue of their position, they have more influence,
Hmm.
and so then they can subtly shift the culture even whether they intend to or not. So I
Hmm.
think where I'm pointing is like everybody needs to understand that they've got some influence in the creation of
Yes.
a culture.
Yes.
Everybody.
I love that. Because what I love about it specifically is the hopefulness
Right.
that comes in it, right? And I think, it's possible that I'd be willing to bet that there's a whole bunch of elephants in this room that we're really not necessarily going to pay attention to
Sure.
all of them.
Yeah.
But one of the elephants that's in this room is sort of a political one. And
Yes.
we think of, like, you and I are both in Canada.
Yeah.
We think of what's happening,
Yeah.
to our southern friends,
Yeah.
and
And
to
here in
our
Canada,
southern
to
friends.
some degree.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think of like, if we all have an opportunity to influence
Mhm.
culture
Mhm.
by influencing the people that we're around.
Yeah.
And eventually, who was it? Malcolm Gladwell, I want to say, the tipping point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Eventually
That's exactly it.
there's a point at which,
Yeah.
a great number of people, realize that there's a seismic shift happening.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, like, the ability of the individual to put their weight on that end of the scale,
Right.
so
Right.
that,
Yeah.
so that belonging can happen.
Right.
And because here's the thing, like, the other part of that, right?
Yeah.
If we look at top down cultures,
Yeah.
and creating a culture of belonging, the other thing that I'm very aware of too, at least from the organizations in which I've had leadership positions,
Yeah.
is I have been in leadership positions in organizations where mostly everybody is a middle-aged white guy like me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So what is belonging
Right.
from that perspective?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name names, but I
No.
could. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, but I could. But there's lots and lots of those organizations that are led
Right.
by middle-aged white guys who are like, well, I belong here, everything's fine.
Yeah. Well, and so what I'm appreciating about the things you're naming, Todd, is like belonging has got lots of entry points to it. There's a
Mhm.
lot of nuance to it.
Mhm.
Um, and creating a culture of belonging can feel energy consuming if you're trying to create it in the wrong space. So if
Mhm.
I am trying to create a space where I belong, where I clearly don't,
Right.
right? That can use up and eat up a lot of my energy.
Mhm.
Um, so this is where it starts to get really, really fun, right? If we talk
Uh-oh.
about systems, right?
Ooh,
And there's a
yep.
lot of conversation in the world right now about systemic
Yep.
needs and systemic cultures of belonging,
Mhm.
right? Trying to inform a system can feel daunting. Like if I
Yes.
am one person trying to create my version of belonging or a space
Mhm.
where I feel like I belong in a system that has historically been not, that can
Right.
be quite exhausting. So then the thing about creating a culture of belonging is that I need to remember, and I would assert that many of us need to remember, that I can't do it alone. It's
Right.
not a, so while I have agency and
Mhm.
while I have responsibility and while I
Mhm.
have opportunity, the longer I try to do this on my own, the longer I try to
Mhm.
shift a culture on my own, the sooner I'll burn out and not be able to do the thing
Yeah.
I want to do,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's Michael Moore who talks about and this started sort of like early in the pandemic was when I first heard about it.
Mhm.
He talks about this work being the work of many, many people
Mhm.
and all of us learning how to rest and not quit.
Yeah.
And he uses the metaphor or the analogy, however you want to look at it, of a choir and singing in a choir, and how
I've heard
if
this. It's so good.
right?
Sorry.
If you've
Go
ever
ahead.
been
Yeah.
yeah, no. If you've ever been
Mhm.
part of a choir, which I have
Mhm.
a long time ago, um,
Mhm.
I know that if there's a long sustained note, I
Mhm.
need to stagger my breathing. If we all breathe at the
Yep.
same time, things go silent.
Yep.
But if we stagger and hold, then the note gets held. And in the same way,
Yeah.
the work gets done, the culture
Mhm.
gets created. But we can't
Mhm.
all be putting in the same amount of effort at the same time. Like it's not going to work. It'll burn us
Yeah.
all.
Well, there are I have activist friends, I have, community organizational friends, and they all say the same things too, that, if you want to be effective within that space, you can't go to every march. You can't go to every protest. You can't organize all of it, because it's not all your responsibility, right? What's that phrase? A rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
And I think, there is individual agency, individual responsibility, which it's a privilege to take.
Yes.
And it's a privilege to share.
Yes. Right.
And I think that's the thing that's so cool about it, because really then, folks who listen to me on LinkedIn blather know that I'm all about human leadership. And I think that in that case, it's really, an opportunity to kind of like pull together, like, if I were to go back to the original, like, maybe it's almost like, well, what does the garlic bulb and the orange segment have in common?
Right.
And
yeah. Right. So similar shape, similar size, perhaps.
Yeah.
And the differences that they have, how can those benefit each other? Right? The challenge is that when we focus exclusively on similarities, we lose the gift of the difference. And in human spaces, for me, that is a big piece of what matters. Like, it's so easy for me to look at you and be like, oh, look, we're the same in that we're both human, and I make up that we're similar ages, and we're both Canadian. We live in Ontario. Like, yay for all of that stuff. But here's what I know about when we talk about similarities versus differences. Talking about similarities creates connection.
Yes.
Making room for difference creates belonging.
Yep. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. What just landed for you as I said that?
Well, it's more expansive, isn't it? It's bigger. Making room for difference creates belonging.
Right. And so notice the subtle shift in wording, right? It's like, talking around similarities creates connection. Absolutely. Oh my God, I went to the same school. Oh, wow, I've been to that country, right? That creates a sense of connection.
Well, it also creates affinity bias, though, too, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas when I can make room, not just talk about, but make room for difference, that's when people can feel like they start to belong. It's like, I'm allowed to be here. I see that you and I are different skin colors, and there's room for that here. And so I feel like I belong, right? That sort of thing.
The word that pops up for me is curiosity.
Absolutely.
Like, it's and it comes, I mean, it's all over the place, right? It's, curiosity is the antidote to fear. Curiosity is a necessary component of love. Curiosity, like, it's all, and what I love about this too is that, curiosity is kind of one of the ingredients in making room for difference.
Absolutely it is. And in my world, I would dare to assert that it's the critical ingredient to making room for difference. Because if I can't get curious about the things that I perceive as different, then I can't actually build understanding, right? It's just sort of like, I notice the difference and see you later.
Well, so okay, so I'm going to bring up something too, because the thing that sparked one of the things that sparked my reaching out to you and wanting to have this conversation was a post that you put on LinkedIn a little while ago.
Yeah.
And it was about and it was about, well, I'm there every now and then. And but it was about political differences within the context, like within a same's context that you found yourself. And certainly I think a lot of us have found ourselves in those places. And it's very easy, particularly now, to kind of have that clash around exactly, right, around people who have different, and particularly when you're in a space where those differences of opinion are really central to, like, and it's not just, like, what was the example that everyone uses, pineapple on pizza, right? Which, by the way, I like. But
excellent,
right, pineapple belongs on pizza. But Affinity bias.
Yeah.
Love you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Exactly.
when it comes to, there is an opinion in the room
Yeah.
that has to do with whether or not I have a right to exist.
Yeah.
It becomes really hard
Right.
to kind of create that room for that difference.
Right. Right. And I think
But
in
that's
that
also
post,
important, isn't it?
it absolutely. Well, and I think in that post, so the post started from a quote that I've been pondering for a number of years. It's from, I had the book on my desk and now I don't. It's from the book called The Wake Up by
Okay.
Michelle Mi-Young Kim. And the
Okay.
quote is, good is a transient adjective, not a permanent identity.
Oh, I
Right.
love that.
And
Yeah.
I remember when I was reading the book, it happens fairly early on. I remember closing the book and just having to sit with that for a second, because I think one of the biggest challenges in our world right now and within each of our human experiences is, I know I want to be a good person.
Hmm.
I want to be a good person. And in
Hmm.
a world where I have been taught that being right is better than being wrong, not
Yes.
only do I want to be good, I want to be right.
Yep.
So then when I go head to head against someone who has not only a differing viewpoint, but as you say, a viewpoint that might suggest that I shouldn't exist, or I shouldn't
Hmm.
exist in this form, or I shouldn't exist in this
Hmm.
space, that is really hard to get curious about.
Yep.
There's a way that I want to label, well, listen, I'm a good person, and clearly you're not, because you think I
Hmm.
don't belong here, right?
Hmm.
And yet there's another quote, you know I'm a quote gal,
Oh yeah, I
one
love it.
by Brené Brown, in which she says, people are hard to hate close up.
Yep.
Move in, speak truth to bullshit, be
Hmm.
civil, hold hands with
Yeah.
strangers. You know, there's she invites us into that place
Hmm.
of, if I stand back here and do
Hmm.
you're wrong,
Hmm.
versus leaning in and going some version of,
Hmm.
Todd, that's really hard for me to be with, and like, help me understand,
Yeah.
or tell me
Yeah.
what you actually mean by that, or whatever. If I get
Uh-huh.
if it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them, like
Hmm.
we probably aren't. There are lots of people in this world that I will not agree with,
Hmm.
but can I at least develop some understanding
Hmm.
and create a space where we both get to be there? Now, in that post, I also said that I do believe that there are some things that revolve around morals and ethics that I can't get behind. I
Hmm.
cannot get behind harm being caused to other
Hmm.
humans. I just can't,
Hmm.
or at least I have
Hmm.
yet to find a space in which I would say yes to that.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, what comes up to me as you say that too, and maybe this is something that folks listening in will resonate with as well, is the choir metaphor again.
Yeah,
Because the thing is like it's not our job
right,
to be able to be there with absolutely everybody that we need,
right, exactly.
but it's someone's job.
Someone,
Someone's going to be able to do that, because
yeah,
the thing is you and I are going to be able to be with people
yeah,
that others will struggle to be with.
right. Right. And when you say that, what I think about is, there have been numerous times in my life where, um, there's somebody who I'm like, oh, there's no way I can sit in the same space with that person.
Hmm.
But then I'll talk to someone else who's like, oh my God, I adore that person, and I'm like, what?
Hmm.
You know, and my tendency, if I'm in my really sort of lower self, is to just
Hmm.
try to be like, why? But if I
Hmm.
get curious, then I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, so what am I missing? What,
Right.
like, because here's been my experience with that person.
Hmm.
What's been your experience? Right.
Yeah.
And I know this is very shocking for some people, but I am the villain in a couple of people's story. I know that. I know that I
No.
know, right? How could it be? But I'm as human as anybody, which means
Yeah.
that I have caused harm. I have
Of
caused
course.
pain, uh, never with intention,
Hmm.
but unintended impact is a real thing.
It's still
And
impact. Yeah.
there's a way for me to take responsibility for that if I know about it. And if I
Hmm.
don't know about it, then I continue to live in my little bit blissful bubble until someone draws it to my
Hmm.
attention. Yeah.
Well, and I think I like what I love about that is like, and all of that can be true while experiencing the transient goodness of your identity, of all of
Exactly.
our identities, right? And
Exactly.
I think, if we allow that transient goodness to be within the identities
Yeah.
of all of the people, and if I make an assumption that that transient goodness exists in the identity of the people that I find myself in conflict with,
Right.
maybe that makes it easier to be curious about where they're coming from too.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly. Such a good
we've
point.
heard that, yeah, like we've heard that thing, or half a dozen times people have said to me, well, find the 5% where they're right. And
Yep.
that's like, I love it as a thought exercise,
Yeah.
but there's a hurdle there too.
Absolutely. Well, I cannot remember the geological term for it, but it's like when we look at the Earth and we see cracks in the Earth's surface,
Hmm.
and they look like they're like different, and then you
Hmm.
start to dig down and you realize that those cracks
Hmm.
actually meet at a point, and
Hmm.
so they have like a similar origin. It's like, oh, wow, we actually started in the same place.
Yeah.
Just over
Yeah.
time, we've evolved to something different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's really true.
yeah,
And Zora is coming in too. I'm going to pull this up.
yeah,
She's offering great leaders help educate their teams about unconscious bias to help dialogue and bridges, which is great. And Zora, thank
yeah,
you for that, because it's a great reminder
yeah,
that this is one of those places, I
yeah,
think, where leaders have an opportunity to influence,
yeah.
the creation of a culture of belonging, if we're to go full circle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what, Gail? It's like we have less than 5 minutes to go
How
before
did
we're
that
done.
happen,
I
Todd? I
know,
don't
right?
understand.
I could talk to you for a really long time.
Likewise.
And I'm just going to say it right here while we're live. If you ever want to do this again, like, you just let me know, because I
Yeah.
would love, this is fun. I love this.
Back at you. I'm
Um,
happy to be in conversation with you.
okay. Thank you. And with only a few minutes left to go, what's the takeaway? Like, what's the aha here?
I think what I'd want folks to walk away with is an understanding that belonging is different from fitting in.
Yeah.
And so when we're creating cultures of belonging, organizations where people belong, we need to look beyond what will have this person fit in. That's not
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
right? What's going to allow this person to feel like they can bring all of themselves to the table, all
Hmm.
aspects of their identity, all aspects of their belief system,
Hmm.
and what's going to have all the people here find that space where they feel safe, because
Right.
safety is a piece of it. Or if they don't feel safe, at least feel able to be brave, right?
Well, yeah. And what I love about that is, and this is the part that we haven't said yet, but what I love about that is that when you can feel safe or brave within that space, then
Mhm.
you can be innovative.
Yeah,
Like, and this is the part, and I know it's icing on the cake, but this is the part where creating a culture of belonging, it's
yeah.
not just good for people, it's good for business. Like, this
Bingo.
is a strong organization
Yeah,
with strong people
yeah,
who are there to do their very best work
yeah,
and feel safe doing it in that environment.
yeah,
And that's the aha, like, that's the why
yeah,
for
yeah,
right up there.
yeah.
Oh, I
Beautiful.
love that. Gail, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with me today. If the folks listening want to get a hold of you, what's the
Yeah.
best way for them to do that?
You can hop over to my website, which is stellar, STELLARCC.com. There's a
Okay,
contact page in there. You can also email me, Gail,
awesome.
Gaal, at
Okay.
stellarcc.com. Yeah,
Okay, and
happy.
we'll put that in the comments,
Yeah,
on
great.
LinkedIn after we're done
Thank
here,
you.
so that folks can do that.
Yeah,
And I'm Todd Karges. You can find me at toddkarges.com. You all know that already.
yeah.
And Gail, thank you so much for today. I've
Todd, it's been such
so enjoyed being here with you.
right? What a great way to like midpoint of my week. Like, yay, this is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah,
Thank you.
fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the broadcast off.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for coming.